There's a moment that happens in every nice guy's life when he catches his reflection in a bathroom mirror at 2 a.m. He's just finished helping someone move, or listening to a friend's relationship problems for 3 hours, or staying late at work again because saying no felt impossible. He looks tired, worn down, but he tells himself this is what good people do. What he doesn't see in that mirror is the invisible ledger he carries everywhere. The careful accounting of every favor given, every boundary crossed, every time he said yes when his soul screamed no. He's been keeping score in a game where only he knows the rules, playing for a prize that always seems just out of reach. This isn't kindness, it's a contract written in disappearing ink, where his goodness should guarantee love in return. Inside the mind of the nice guy lives an elaborate emotional stock market where every interaction is a transaction. Think of it like a bank where kindness is currency, where being helpful is an investment strategy, where accommodation is the interest he pays on the loan of other people's affection. He learned this system early, usually in childhood homes where love felt like a performance review, where being good meant being invisible, where his natural impulses, his authentic reactions, his actual needs were somehow too much for the people who were supposed to love him without conditions. So he developed what psychologists call a fawn response. Not fight, not flight, not freeze, but fawn. Becomes so agreeable, so helpful, so easy to manage that no one would ever want to hurt or abandon him. His nervous system made a calculation that still runs his life. Better to be needed than to be known. Every morning he puts on what feels like kindness, but functions like armor. He anticipates everyone's needs before they're expressed. He remembers birthdays, brings coffee, offers rides, listens to problems he can't solve. Not because his heart is overflowing with generosity, but because his worth depends entirely on his usefulness to others. The exhaustion is constant but invisible. He's like someone holding their breath underwater, thinking they're safe, not realizing they're slowly suffocating. Every conversation becomes a careful negotiation where he monitors the other person's emotional temperature, adjusting his responses to maintain their comfort. He mistakes this hypervigilance for empathy, but real empathy doesn't require you to disappear. The cruel mathematics of his system becomes clear in romantic relationships. He gives and gives and gives, building up what feels like relationship credit. He listens without judgment, supports without question, accommodates without complaint. In his internal ledger, this should add up to love. When it doesn't, when she chooses someone who seems to care less, the nice guy's world collapses into bitter confusion. He calls it finishing last, but he was never really in the race. He was sitting in the stands, keeping score of a game no one else was playing. What he doesn't understand is that his niceness isn't actually nice. It's a sophisticated control mechanism designed to manage other people's reactions to him. Every favor comes with invisible strings attached. Every act of service carries an unspoken invoice. He's not giving freely, he's making investments with expected returns. The women he pursues sense this transaction beneath the surface. They feel the weight of debts they never agreed to owe. They lose respect for someone who has no boundaries, no authentic preferences, no real self to discover or be challenged by. His friends begin to avoid sharing real problems with him because his help always comes with an undertone of martyrdom. His solutions feel more about his need to be needed than their actual well-being. They start to sense that their struggles are being used as fuel for his identity as the helpful one. The architecture of approval becomes a prison where the walls are made of other people's expectations, and the bars are forged from his own desperate need to be indispensable. He's built his entire sense of worth on external validation, like a house constructed entirely on someone else's foundation. But here's what the nice guy doesn't see. People don't actually want someone with no edges, no opinions, no authentic self to bump up against. They want connection, not convenience. They want to be chosen by someone who has other options, not someone who clings because they believe this is the best they'll ever get. His niceness has become his cage. But what the nice guy doesn't fully understand is that his elaborate performance comes with a price that extends far beyond his own exhaustion. The relationships he's trying to protect through constant accommodation slowly suffocate under the weight of all that artificial harmony. Think of intimacy like a fire that requires oxygen to survive. It needs honest disagreement, authentic friction, the willingness to show up as yourself even when that self might disappoint someone. But the nice guy smothers every flame with his agreeableness, creating relationships that feel safe but never truly alive. His romantic partners begin to feel like they're dating a ghost, someone who's physically present but emotionally unavailable, someone who agrees with everything but stands for nothing, someone who gives constantly but never receives, creating an imbalance that makes genuine reciprocity impossible. They start to crave what he can't provide: authentic challenge, real disagreement, the friction that creates actual intimacy. They lose attraction to someone who has no edges, no genuine preferences, no authentic self to discover or be surprised by. They begin to feel guilty for having needs because his giving feels so selfless, so sacrificial. The nice guy interprets this withdrawal as evidence that he needs to try harder, give more, accommodate better. He doubles down on the very behaviors that are creating the distance, trapped in a cycle where his solution becomes his problem. His children, if he has them, learn that love is performance-based. They watch their father disappear into whatever their mother needs, never seeing what authentic strength looks like. They absorb the lesson that having needs is selfish, that expressing preferences is demanding, that taking up space requires constant justification. In professional settings, the cost becomes even more visible. Colleagues lose respect for someone who never advocates for themselves, never pushes back on unreasonable requests, never brings authentic perspective to important decisions. They mistake his accommodation for weakness rather than recognizing the sophisticated control mechanism it actually represents. He watches promotions go to people who seem less qualified but more willing to take up space. He sees leadership roles filled by individuals who express opinions, set boundaries, advocate for their ideas. But he can't connect these observations to his own invisible presence in professional dynamics. The anger that he's been suppressing for years doesn't disappear. It accumulates in his body like sediment in a riverbed, creating physical tension, emotional numbness, and a constant undercurrent of resentment that colors every interaction. He becomes passive-aggressive without realizing it, expressing his frustration through what he doesn't do rather than what he does. Late at night, when the performance finally ends, he feels the weight of everything he's swallowed, every opinion he didn't express, every boundary he didn't set, every time he said yes when his entire being wanted to say no. The exhaustion isn't just physical, it's existential. He's tired of being a supporting character in his own life. His friends begin to avoid him, not because they don't care, but because every interaction feels like a transaction. His listening comes with an invisible price tag. His help arrives wrapped in martyrdom. They sense the scorekeeping, the unspoken contracts, the way their gratitude is being harvested as evidence of his worth. The nice guy starts to notice patterns but can't see his role in creating them. Women choose men who seem less caring. Friends confide in people who seem less available. Opportunities go to individuals who seem less accommodating. He begins to develop a bitter narrative about how the world rewards selfishness and punishes goodness. But he's not seeing the whole picture. He's not witnessing the authentic confidence that attracts people, the genuine boundaries that create respect, the real kindness that comes from choice rather than compulsion. He's measuring everyone else's success against his own carefully constructed failure. The costume he's been wearing has become his skin. He's forgotten what it feels like to move through the world without constantly monitoring everyone else's emotional temperature, without translating every impulse through the filter of how it will be received. He's created a life where he's indispensable to everyone, but invisible to himself, where he knows everyone else's preferences, but has become a stranger to his own desires, where he's so busy being what others need that he's lost touch with who he actually is underneath all the careful accommodation. The price of his niceness isn't just his authenticity, it's his aliveness. But here's what the nice guy doesn't understand about his own story. The very sensitivity that drives him to accommodate everyone is the same sensitivity that can teach him how to love authentically. The awareness that makes him hypervigilant to others' needs can be redirected toward his own neglected heart. The rebellion doesn't begin with dramatic gestures or sudden personality changes. It starts with something far more radical, the quiet recognition that his niceness isn't actually serving anyone. Think of it like waking up from a dream where you've been running towards something that keeps moving further away. The moment you stop running, you realize the thing you were chasing was never real. The love he's been trying to earn through performance was never the love he actually needed. Real love doesn't require auditions. The first crack in his system often comes through exhaustion so complete that he can't maintain the performance anymore. His body starts saying no before his mind catches up. He finds himself too tired to anticipate everyone's needs, too depleted to manage their emotions, too empty to give from reserves that no longer exist. This feels like failure to him, but it's actually the beginning of freedom. In that space where his automatic responses used to live, something new becomes possible. Not the opposite of niceness, but something deeper. Genuine kindness that comes from choice rather than compulsion, from abundance rather than scarcity, from self-respect rather than self-abandonment. The practice starts small, saying no to one request without elaborate explanations, expressing a preference when asked, even if it might inconvenience someone, staying quiet when his impulse is to fill uncomfortable silence with helpful suggestions. These tiny acts of authenticity feel terrifying because his nervous system has been programmed to interpret any deviation from accommodation as relationship suicide. But what he discovers, slowly and with great surprise, is that most people respect boundaries more than they respect doormats. His first real no doesn't end a friendship. His first expressed preference doesn't drive away a romantic interest. His first moment of genuine disagreement doesn't create the abandonment he spent his life avoiding. Instead, something unexpected happens. People begin to see him more clearly. The rebellion deepens when he starts to understand the difference between being needed and being wanted. Being needed means someone requires your function. Being wanted means someone desires your presence. He spent his entire life optimizing for the first while starving for the second. This shift requires him to develop what psychologists call internal validation. Instead of constantly checking external sources for evidence of his worth, he begins building a relationship with his own approval. He starts asking not, "What will they think?" but "What do I think?" The practice becomes learning to tolerate other people's disappointment. Their feelings about his choices are information about them, not instructions for him. He can be compassionate about their disappointment without being responsible for fixing it. He begins to reframe conflict not as relationship failure, but as relationship deepening. The fights he's been avoiding aren't connection killers. They're opportunities for genuine intimacy, chances to be known and to know others more fully. Slowly he discovers that the people worth knowing love his authenticity more than his accommodation. They respect his boundaries more than his endless availability. They treasure his genuine kindness more than his performed niceness. The rebellion isn't about becoming selfish or uncaring. It's about caring for himself with the same tenderness he's always shown others. It's about understanding that real love doesn't require him to disappear. His sensitivity doesn't need to be cured. It needs to be honored, protected, and directed toward creating the kind of connections that nourish rather than drain his soul. Your journey away from the nice guy trap isn't about becoming someone completely different. It's about becoming more fully who you've always been, underneath all the careful editing, all the strategic accommodation, all the exhausting performance of perpetual agreeableness. The courage you need isn't the courage to be mean or selfish. It's the courage to disappoint people, to let them feel whatever they feel about your authentic choices without rushing in to manage their emotions or fix their discomfort. This is perhaps the most radical act for someone who has spent their entire life as an emotional janitor, constantly cleaning up feelings that were never their responsibility to begin with. Think of disappointment like weather. It comes and goes. It's not your job to be everyone's personal climate control system, maintaining perfect emotional temperature at all times. People are capable of experiencing disappointment and surviving it. In fact, they're supposed to. When you start showing up authentically, some people will be confused. They've grown accustomed to your endless accommodation, your reflexive yes, your willingness to shrink yourself to fit whatever space they needed you to occupy. Your newfound boundaries might feel foreign to them. Let them adjust. The people who truly care about you will respect your evolution. They'll be curious about this version of you that has opinions, preferences, limits. They'll discover that loving someone with boundaries is actually easier than loving someone without them, because they'll never have to guess what you really think or worry about what you're silently resenting. Your niceness was never really about them anyway. It was about your own fear of being abandoned, your own terror of being seen as difficult, your own desperate need to control how others perceived you. Real kindness doesn't need to control outcomes. It can afford to be generous because it comes from genuine care rather than strategic positioning. The relationships that can't survive your authenticity weren't actually relationships with you. They were relationships with your performance, your function, your willingness to be whatever someone else needed. Those connections were built on a foundation of your self-abandonment. When you stop abandoning yourself, they naturally dissolve. This isn't loss, it's liberation. What emerges in the space where your old patterns used to live is something you may have never experienced before. The possibility of being loved for who you are rather than what you do. The chance to give from genuine abundance rather than desperate scarcity. The opportunity to receive care without having to earn it through constant service. Your sensitivity, that deep awareness that made you want to take care of everyone, doesn't disappear. It transforms. Instead of being a burden that drives you to accommodate, it becomes wisdom that helps you respond appropriately without losing yourself in the process. You learn to offer your gifts freely without invisible strings attached. You discover that real love doesn't require you to be perfect, accommodating, or endlessly available. It asks only that you be present, honest, and courageously yourself. The nice guy who finishes last was never really in the race, but the authentic person who emerges from his ashes, that person doesn't need to race at all. They're already whole.